This is the exit playbook, and this is, how everyone wins in acquisitions. And this is a big reason why I started this company. I think acquisitions is a great way to become an entrepreneur, to get into a business that you may not have otherwise started on your own, or if you have a great business, to unlock liquidity and obtain some freedom to move on to something new. So to kick things off, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Andrew Gazdecki. I've been an entrepreneur my whole career. I've had one job for about a year. That was about it. Other than that, early on, I just knew that building companies was something I really wanted to do. And so before Acquire.com, I built a company called Business Apps in college. It was a drag and drop mobile app builder for small businesses. So I built a company around that. I saw the iPhone come out. No one knew how to develop mobile apps at the time. So I saw there was do-it-yourself website builders. I figured, there should be do-it-yourself mobile app builders. So that company, I bootstrapped that to about 10 million in recurring revenue. It was acquired by a private equity firm. That was one of the big moments for me in terms of really realizing that as entrepreneurs, we're not necessarily taught how to sell companies. It's kind of a mysterious black box. How many of you feel like you're very versed in acquisitions? Like the back of your hand? Okay, there's a few of you. And that's the thing with acquisitions. When you think of, books about entrepreneurship, there's hundreds of books on financing, marketing, sales, etc. And there's like 2 books on acquisitions. So that was a big thing that I wanted to change with Acquire, is just educate entrepreneurs through the process. Because even going through the experience myself, from simple things like finding the buyer, it took years and it's a headache. So I thought, there has to be an easier way. And that's how Acquire.com was born. Another part of my story too, has anybody heard of Bank to the Future by chance? Anybody into cryptocurrencies? Who's into cryptocurrencies as another question? Okay, all right. There's a few. This story is kind of interesting. So after Business Apps was acquired, I decided to start a crypto exchange for some reason. Don't ask me why. It turned out to be a terrible idea. I'll tell you the story. So we were developing a company that was essentially helping facilitate securities, which is a big no-no. We didn't know it at the time. It was built on the Ethereum blockchain before cryptocurrencies were really deemed securities. So as we were building this, we thought it was going to be essentially a commodities trading platform. And then our largest competitor actually got fined by the SEC. And I remember we had a moment where I said, oh shit, do we like cryptocurrencies that much? Do we want to go to jail over this? So we were just building software. We didn't know what this was going to be used for. The answer to that question was no. And so long story short, we never launched the platform. Flipped the company to essentially be a white label platform. And the idea was we don't have the regulatory licenses to properly launch this. And so we were looking for a partner that could take our software, launch what we were trying to do, and then we'd potentially sell the business to them. And that's what we were able to do. Bank to the Future had the proper regulatory licenses, and that's who we sold the company to. But I think the story there is when I was building the company, it didn't go as planned. Obviously I wanted it to be something completely different than what it ended up being. But there's moments where I just wanted to hit the eject button. I just wanted to find a buyer quickly. And we were lucky to find a buyer. So that's another example of where I wish something like Acquire.com existed. And so a big part of this company also is, me, scratching my own itch and building something that I wish I had through building these 2 companies here. So I'm going to be diving into just some good strategies. I hope you all just have takeaways, whether you're a buyer or a seller, whether you're looking to acquire a startup, maybe you're looking to sell your business over the next year, whatever it may be. This is going to be just a high-level overview of how I like to think of acquisitions. Because at Acquire.com, we try to break things down into a process that's just easy for everybody to understand. So this is the original process that I put together when I originally launched the company, when it was called MicroAcquire. Does anyone remember those days when it was called MicroAcquire? Okay, all right. Who got the vintage socks that we had in the back? People pick those up? All right, we should have brought more of them. So this is an easy way to think of how we like to break down acquisitions. So First, obviously, you need to create buyer interest. That's going to be one of the most important things that you do during a process. On average, when we see people selling with acquire.com, you can expect 50 to 100 plus NDAs signed by buyers. This also comes in really, really quickly. And then after that, you're going to want to put together a deal data room. Who knows what a data room is? Okay, all right. We're going over some basics here. It's essentially a folder that outlines, processes of your business, contains, materials that you're going to want a buyer to review. So you essentially put that together, and then you're going to create a sales process timeline. This is where we're getting maybe a little bit more advanced. Who knows what a deal schedule is? Okay, all right. I know you do, Kai. Yeah, so we'll put that together. And then from there, you're managing acquisition conversations. And I think one of the most surprising things when a founder goes through this is just how important each of these steps can be and how critical it is. In terms of the timeline, I think it's also important to have expectations set with both buyers and sellers in terms of what does this process look like. So this is a typical timeline that we see on acquire.com. Sometimes we see, Kai, what's the fastest deal that you've seen? Right, 14 days? Okay, what's the longest? Who's done an acquisition under 14 days? Tomer, okay. Does anyone have an acquisition story over a year? Over a year? Wow, okay. So, this by no means is set in stone. It's not, it's basically a guide in terms of the averages that we see. But right off the bat, you're going to see preparation. That's where we're working with founders to prepare things like a confidential information memorandum. We're going to recast financials. Then we're going to move to sale ready. That's where we're essentially going to go over how the conversations with buyers could go and how they should really approach those different calls. And then from there, day 3 to day 30, that's going to be conversations with buyers. That's where the sellers are getting to know different buyers vice versa, why you're looking to sell the business. Negotiations, day 30 to 60. Who's been a part of negotiations where maybe it went longer than this? Tomer, what's like the longest period of negotiations you've been in? I'm guessing days.
Probably
2 months, okay. All right. So with negotiations, this is where deal structure is really going to be important. Is it all cash? Is there going to be an earnout? Is there seller financing involved? Is there financing involved? These are questions you definitely want to ask when you're in negotiations. And then day 60 to 120, that's due diligence. That's who's gone through due diligence. Raise your hand if you thought it was a ton of fun. Yeah, probably. Brian. Oh yeah, me and Brian went through due diligence at Business House. Good times. So that's where you're doing all that fun stuff. It's a necessary component of acquisitions, and then once you're through that, you've successfully acquired a business or you've been acquired. I love this quote here at the bottom. You can't make a good deal with a bad person. I think there's just a ton of truth in that. A lot of sellers I work with right off the bat, I'll say, how is your relationship with a buyer that is interested? How are things going with them? And then also vice versa when we're talking to different buyers, like how is the fit with the seller? I think acquisitions, there's a huge component of trust. And if it's just not there, I think it's an uphill battle with acquisitions. So Warren Buffett, super smart guy. These are some example questions that we typically will run sellers through just to prepare. These are questions that I think come up on almost every acquisition call, at least a few of them or a handful of them. I've seen founders stumble over these questions, which is completely fine. But obviously in acquisitions, being prepared is so important. Kai, do you care if I continue to ask you questions right here? How important is preparation, in your opinion, to acquisitions?
It's really important. It's what expedites that timeline in terms of being efficient or being like a year plus sale.
Yeah.
Carry forward.
So these questions right here, just understanding what is your asking price, when founders are like, I'm not sure, maybe it's either 10 million or 100,000, I don't know. I think, and that actually happens. You give the vibe that you're just not really serious about selling your business or you're not realistic in terms of the asking price. What is your current true annual recurring revenue? If numbers don't match, it's not gonna be good for either party. Has anyone gone through due diligence with maybe a company that you're looking to buy and then you find out the numbers don't add up or something like that? Has anybody gone through that? Did anybody continue with that deal based on that? See, the hands just went down. So the point I'm trying to make is, the more you can prepare to sell your business, the more you're going to have opportunities to not have deals fall out. I'm not going to read all these, but I think you all get an understanding of basically just how important this preparation is. And the more you're prepared as you go into the sale process, the better experience it's going to be for both sides. Who here has seen this image before? This is our deal schedule at Acquire. All right, okay. So this one, I think when we apply structure to deals, it allows things to move at a timeline that I think works great for both buyers and sellers, meaning as a seller without structure to the acquisition process, you can have offers come in kind of at any point. And when you have an offer come in at week 1 and then one at week 8 or something like that, you don't really give yourself an opportunity to properly negotiate those offers. And then you also don't give buyers structure to go down in terms of this is when you're expecting to have all your initial calls done by, this is when you expect indication of interest, this is when you want formal offers in by. So having structure to your acquisition process, I think benefits both buyers and sellers and gives momentum behind deals so you can ideally secure multiple offers. Does anybody have any questions about this slide? I know this is kind of the busier slide in my presentation.
I have a quick question for you. Why does Acquire sort of remove the sale that might be underway when an LOI is under offer rather than allowing some sort of, bidding opportunity to take place on the platform to get more people interested as opposed to taking it kind of off the market?
That's a really good question. Okay, so when someone accepts a letter of intent, why do we take that deal off market? The simple answer there is for legal purposes. When you accept an LOI, there's typically a clause called exclusivity. And that means the buyer who issued you the LOI, they now have the legal right to exclusively work with you for a period typically between 30 to 60 days. And so we'll lock up the listing because of that term right there. You can negotiate non-exclusivity though. But the reason that most buyers will ask for exclusivity is they're putting time into the acquisition. They're going to be, potentially putting in resources, and they don't want to know that you're shopping the deal behind their back if they're going to be putting in that time commitment. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, ours didn't have an exclusivity clause in it, and so I was hopeful to continue to get those who were somewhat interested to be more interested because now others were interested and potentially allow it to increase the price. But yeah, certainly there's best to say bought up and shit anymore.
Yeah. Since there's a lot of buyers in here, I don't know how many tips I can share on the sell side. But no, jokes aside, one cool feature we have on Acquire is when you receive a letter of intent as a seller, all buyers are notified. And every buyer knows and every seller knows is when you're in an acquisition process, when you can leverage an offer to receive other offers, that creates just so much momentum. So that's the opportunity to do it. Is before you accept the offer, you can go back to every buyer and say, hey, I just received an offer. Would you be able to increase your price or your terms? Or maybe they haven't submitted an offer and all. And you can say, are you thinking about submitting an offer? I'm thinking about, accepting this offer. Okay, I'm going to keep calling on you. You're right here in front. Do you want to tell everybody who you are and what you do at Acquire?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kai. I'm the lead advisor at Acquire. Some of you I've seen before, so it's good to see everyone here. What I do is I help sellers basically facilitate their deal. So questions like this: when to use a deal schedule, how to leverage competition ethically. And so to answer this question here, when you get an offer, as Andrew said, buyers get notified. There is a finite window to where the buyer is going to feel that you're dragging out the deal. And then there is a natural window where you can talk to other buyers and say, hey, I did receive an offer. Are you going to be submitting one? And that's where you can professionally put competition into the deal. So it's that fine line of you don't want to drag out the deal too long because the buyer will get frustrated and then your reputation sinks. But you do want to give yourself an idea of what types of offers that you can actually get.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kai.
All right.
Yeah, Kai's the guy we go to if we're looking to close multi-million-dollar deals. So appreciate that insight. Okay, this testimonial here, this one means a lot to me because this was actually the first testimonial we ever got for Acquire.com. And I remember when this business sold on the platform. Crazy thing, we've literally helped over 1,000 entrepreneurs sell their business. And obviously on the other side of that is 1,000 plus buyers acquiring businesses. But this one happened actually when I was on vacation during COVID. So the business was just me at the time. There was no employees, there was no staff. And I just had this idea to launch this crazy marketplace to help entrepreneurs and others acquire different startups and tech companies. I thought it was a cool business. I had no idea it was going to work. I didn't have any expectations. I keep like a business journal, not like a weird one where like, hey, do your diary. It's just every month, how are things going? What's on my mind? Where do I expect myself to be in 30 days? And I have a journal entry that's like, oh, I launched this business, MicroAcquire. I don't think it's going to do very well, but the website looks good, at least. But I remember this one being just kind of the spark that kind of led to where the company is now. So just awesome to see. And a big part of that is, really understanding why acquisitions, they matter so much to just the startup ecosystem. The first reason for that is just liquidity. Liquidity is important for entrepreneurs for a number of reasons. A lot of people build businesses, myself included, to eventually sell them one day. That's the day where you get to celebrate, you get to pop champagne, whatever your view of that is. Selling a startup allows entrepreneurs to cash in on their hard work. There's just so much truth to that. I think once that happens with a lot of entrepreneurs, they reinvest back into the startup ecosystem, they move on, they build a different business. I can't even tell you the amount of entrepreneurs I meet that are selling a business on Acquire so they can begin working on another business, or they'll sell the business and then 6 months later they come in with another business, and then a year later another business. But it's being able to sell the business and having liquidity, I think, is just so important to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And then for buyers, which a lot of you are looking to acquire startups, obviously it's one of the fastest ways to grow an existing business, to be able to not just start a product from scratch, but to acquire something that's already working. So buying a profitable business can be a faster, lower risk path to entrepreneurship. I think there's just so much truth to this, and this wasn't as obvious a decade ago or 5 years ago, in my opinion. I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs are really starting to see, especially if you've built a startup from scratch. Maybe it didn't get very far. Maybe it was just a complete grind. I call it the phase of just chewing glass for 2 years. Regardless of what you build, it's going to just take years to get it off the ground. And some entrepreneurs just don't want to do that. I think that's awesome. You get to buy a business that things are kind of working, starting to work, and you can just jump straight into improving. Maybe if you're good at marketing, you're good at sales, you're good at product development, whatever that be. And then next, I think just in terms of being able to connect buyers and sellers to allow for more of these opportunities is just awesome. And that's why I think what we do is just so important. I think something like Acquire needs to exist so entrepreneurs have the ability to quickly sell their business, and buyers have the ability to acquire businesses and step in as CEO rather than just starting the business from scratch. So why sellers exit? Pretty straightforward. They want liquidity. They want to get paid. They want to cash in their chips. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe it's someone in the crowd that's feeling that. Maybe you've lost interest in the business. Maybe you want to do something completely new. Maybe you're already working on something completely new. Those are all valid reasons to sell a startup. I've worked with founders that have been going through every single one of those situations where the business is doing millions in revenue and they want to cash in their chips. Those moments are so incredibly rewarding because those are truly life-changing acquisitions. And then I also meet founders that are completely burned out. They just want to pay their investors back. They want to move on. Those moments are also completely rewarding because we allow them to move on to whatever that next chapter is for them as an entrepreneur. And then freedom. Who's built a business here? Who thinks it's easy? Yeah, that's okay. sometimes, just being able to have a fresh slate where who wishes they had just like an open calendar, they could just wake up and no phone calls, no emails. This is kind of an ironic question. I like to work, so I don't know if I would like that. The point I'm trying to make is sometimes selling a business just allows you to spend more time with your family, your friends, or more time with the other company that you're building, or potentially, acquire businesses, whatever it may be. It's really rewarding for me to be able to provide liquidity and then also freedom to entrepreneurs. Then why buyers buy? Obviously growth, trying to grow an existing business. I've seen countless different startups acquire another startup for their product or their team or their access to a certain market. It's an incredible strategy for growth. There's been a lot of really interesting roll-up plays that I've seen as well, or private equity firms that are able to essentially just buy forward cash flow of different startups. And then shortcuts as well, being able to tap into typically a different market or a different customer segment faster than they would be from scratch. I think these are awesome reasons to acquire a startup. Or like I had mentioned previously, you just want to have a lifestyle business. You want to raise the hands. Who's looking to acquire a business to essentially operate as a lifestyle business, or that'd be you? Nice. I think that's also just an awesome reason to acquire a business where you can step in as the operator or the CEO from day one. And I'm a big believer where you do not have to build $1 billion company to be successful. And I think acquiring a business that either replaces your existing income or your salary is an awesome strategy. Really what sellers and buyers are looking for when they're looking to sell their business. So the dual perspective, sellers and buyers. For sellers, you're going to want to showcase stability and also scalability, meaning there is still some upside in the business. What is that as the owner of the business? Those questions are going to be best answered by you. So I always recommend sometimes just documenting these things. You could just outline how would you grow this business if you were to stay in it for another few years or spend. A good question we ask is, if you had $5 million to spend on whatever you want in the business, what would that look like? Also demonstrating operational excellence. This essentially means the business isn't heavily reliant on one person. Who has looked at a business before where without the owner, it would just completely fall apart? Did anyone end up buying those businesses? I've seen it happen. You can still sell those businesses, but it's definitely going to be more of an uphill battle. So the tip here for entrepreneurs is, start documenting your processes, start delegating more if you can, start potentially hiring additional staff into the business, because the best businesses to buy are generally the easiest to operate, where a new owner can step in, you have operation manuals. They're essentially not, in there day one and realizing, without you in the business, it's going to fall apart. Those are really hard acquisitions. And then prepare for a smooth transition. So when we work with sellers and they're open to a transition, meaning, hey, I'll stay on for 6 months and I'll provide, part-time support or something like that. Those acquisitions tend to get way more offers because you're de-risking the acquisition for potential buyers. A show of hands, who would be interested in an acquisition if there's no transition support? Meaning from day one, the founder is going to move on, you're on your own. Yeah, I don't see any. But acquisitions, they go a lot smoother when someone is able to, transition the business over, they're there for support. It's also just a great way to entice more buyers because, again, the name of the game in acquisitions is you want to de-risk the opportunity. So starting from the top, being able to show stability in the business, is churn out of control, is revenue consistent, documenting your processes, and then just being open to support, I think, can go a long ways. And buyers, obviously are looking to see these same things. Does anyone want to chime in? What are some other things as a buyer that you love to see in an acquisition opportunity? Maybe it's, the seller has recorded ins and outs of the businesses. Maybe it's, yeah, go ahead.
So for me, I bought a software company from a marketer, and he stayed on as the CMO. So yeah, I want to run a software company. I don't want to do marketing. He owned a software company, didn't want to do software, didn't want to run the company, but he wanted to do the marketing. So for me, now he's a starter, and that really worked out.
Those acquisitions are great because essentially, if I understand correctly, the owner gets to focus on what they love to do, and then you get to come in and help them grow the business further. Is that kind of right? Nice. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that question. So the question was, if you were going to start the business over again today, what would you do differently? That's great. Anyone else want to add anything? Just things that you like to see in an acquisition or things that you don't like to see in an acquisition? Yep.
I really like it when the seller knows why customers buy. Oftentimes it gets a seller where they're not sure how their business was successful.
Yeah.
So that shows a level of just maturity and understanding of the market.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Went through a deal where I had to do a rebranding after the acquisition because they wanted to keep the name or the trademark for something else, and that was nightmare. It was not do that again.
What went wrong? What didn't you? Yeah.
I underestimated how much work it would be to just recreate all the access the business depended on, movies, webinars, like that logo and branding, stuff, all of these things. Like the website was easy, but it's a long tail of concept to its real part.
Yeah, we went through a rebrand, and it was much more work than I thought. So just best practices for a successful exit. These are, I'd say, non-negotiables. These are just mandatory items that I see for successful acquisitions. The first one is clear financials. As a buyer, how important are clear financials? Are they really important? Raise your hand if you think they are. I think that was it's a given. And it really surprises a lot of founders. I remember a piece of advice I got with my first company. Basically hire a VP of finance because the goodwill that you're going to create during the acquisition process will be worth more than you can ever put a number on. Brian, that's why I hired you. Yeah. And it worked out really well, but there's so much truth to that in terms of that first impression. If it's a financial buyer, they're looking at different P&Ls, they have different data requests. Being able to promptly respond to those is huge. Streamlining operations and documenting key processes. I touched on this a second ago, but again, the hardest acquisitions I've seen are where it's so hard for a new buyer to just wrap their head around how do they operate the business. It falls apart when the existing owner isn't there. So just documenting key processes. I know it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised at how many founders I work with where this is a surprise or there isn't any documentations. And I was one of those founders too, where everything's kind of a mess. It's absolutely perfect because I know how to understand certain things, but when you go to market, it's critical. Clear growth strategy, future projections, just giving existing buyers an understanding of how would you grow the business if, you were going to continue operating it. Where is the opportunity? What does the product roadmap look like? What are customers asking for today with the business that may not exist? And then the importance of transparency and preparation. I think it's really obvious when we work with founders that go to market and they don't necessarily take the preparation too seriously. I think buyers also experience that as well. Like just as a round of hand, I know I'm doing this a ton, I appreciate it. But when you speak with a founder, they're not prepared, how obvious is it compared to when you deal with an acquisition where the founder is super prepared? Does anyone have like a story where, you were impressed by, how prepared a founder was with, the materials they prepped, or maybe they had recorded video, maybe a really put together data room? Does anybody have an acquisition story around that? Yeah.
I have one here, the whole transition document. So you itemize every item for transitions for the new buyer.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question about that, if you don't mind. Does it help? I mean, I'm sitting in jobs, like you lay out in a document, this is what the ideal customer looks like.
Absolutely.
These are their characteristics, this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. When you say customer, do you mean buyer of your business or just this is the ideal customer profile? Yeah, absolutely. I think most buyers will want to know that. How are you acquiring customers? What does that typical customer profile look like? Absolutely.
So we have the processes and then the day-to-day operations, I guess, to be here as well.
Yeah.
It's done.
The more you can provide buyers to just wrap their head around the business, from marketing to sales to operations, product development, the better. When you put all this together, to me, it really does stand out in terms of the success that we see on acquire.com. Sometimes when I see businesses come in and they have all this material. The founders put time into all these documents. They have a transition plan put together. These are all the services we use. Month 1, this is what I suggest we focus on. Month 2, month 3, this is how we acquire customers. This is the profile of the customer. Oh, here's a recorded video of how the product works. When you put all that together, sometimes before businesses go live, I know this one's going to get a ton of different offers. Because again, you're de-risking the opportunity. You're helping buyers quickly wrap their head around what does the business do. And it just appears as a much better opportunity. And then just some red flags as well. This is going to be just a lot of the inverse of what I've been saying up here. Messy financials. I cannot overstate just how often I've seen this completely derail acquisitions or really just show no interest with buyers. I think that's probably the number one reason I see most deals fall apart is they go to market, things don't necessarily make complete sense, the P&Ls are messy, or there's also just a lack of material. It's really hard to get excited around these types of businesses. Sometimes you can find just really, really good businesses where everything just can kind of speak for itself, meaning the business is just so high quality, where the founder really doesn't need to prepare, but that's not always the case. It's actually far from it. And then again, lack of documented processes or legal ambiguities. All of this, anything that can essentially be a red flag for buyers, a clear reason to walk away from the acquisition. Does anybody have another red flag that they've seen, or maybe you've been in an acquisition? Customer concentration, that's a very big one as well. Okay, and then as you move along in the acquisition journey, there's always going to be these 3 conditions to look at: financial considerations, legal considerations, operational considerations. All of them I've seen derail acquisitions before. So just having a baseline understanding of why they're important when you're looking to sell a business, and obviously when you're looking to buy a business as well, I think is hugely important. I've seen acquisitions fall apart with a $10,000 discrepancy with financials. Obviously, no one wants to acquire a business with legal issues or legal headaches, because when you acquire a company, you don't want that to come along with it. So as a founder, if you're looking to sell your business, start documenting all the clauses you have in your business, all the contracts that you have with employees or contractors. If you don't have them already, you should have them in place. But again, I think a lot of you would be surprised at what I've seen in terms of lack of preparation when people go to sell their business. And then operational considerations as well, meaning if you haven't documented these things, this is a great opportunity to learn how to do that, understand what buyers are going to be looking for. Okay, deal structures. Who here has ever done an all-cash acquisition, whether on the buy side or the sell side? All right, who's done more of a creative financing? There's some seller financing involved or some earnout component involved. Okay, a little bit more hands go up. Yeah, I think the main point I'd love to get across on this slide, when you go to sell a business or even when you look to acquire a business, the terms that you use can create true win-win acquisitions, where maybe you want to align the existing owner on sales performance or revenue performance, or you just don't think that the revenue is going to continue a year out. An earnout or seller financing is a way to help there. And then let's say the seller has maybe a really high expectation on price. This is a way to potentially close the gap. All cash deals, they do happen. It's going to definitely be in situations where there's a lot of competition on the deal. The seller has a lot of leverage, and that's where they're going to be asking for all cash offers. And maybe to win the deal, you have to do an all cash acquisition. So there's no right or wrong way to structure the acquisition. But they both have pros and they both have cons. And the majority of the acquisitions that we see at acquire.com are a mix. They're 80% cash, 20% seller financing, or has an earnout component. Kai, I haven't called on you in a little bit. What would you say like the percentage of deals that you see that are all cash?
20 to 30%.
Yeah. Moving on to post-acquisition support. This is generally just an outline of what to expect once the acquisition closes. First 30 days are going to be focused on integration with customers and existing employees. This is the initial handover. This is when the existing owner is going to be most important most of the time, depending on the acquisition. The next 3 to 6 months are going to be process optimization, looking into the business, where are the quick wins, what can be changed without rocking the boat too much. Typically what I see in month 3 to 6 in terms of growth levers, pricing is, a really obvious one. Does anybody else have maybe an example of what is like the first growth lever that you look at once you acquire a business? Is it pricing? Is it going back to existing customers and getting their feedback and building that into the product? But again, this is just as important as the actual acquisition process is what's going to happen post-close. How are you going to grow the business? And there's a lot of learnings here that you can get from the existing owner. And then how does Acquire.com help you succeed? Well, we have a platform that will connect you with thousands of different businesses. Who here goes on Acquire.com every other day? Is there anybody in here? All right. What about once a week? All right. So every day we're taking new businesses live. We have tools for due diligence. We're really just trying to make this process as easy as possible for everybody in here. So really excited to continue this day. I think there's a lot of collective knowledge in this room, and I guess what I'm hoping to see more than anything is just all of you really mingle with each other and being able to share the knowledge that you have. I can already tell there's a lot of acquisition experience in here, and there's a lot that we can all learn from each other. So again, thank you all for coming. It's going to be an awesome day. And if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer them. I feel like that was a long talk from me. So thank you.